Am I the asshole for choosing my biological child over my foster son? My husband and I never thought that we could get pregnant, so we got plenty of therapy after a few failed treatments and moved to fostering with the intent to adopt. We've had a few fosters, but this concerns our current foster, a 9-year-old who's been with us for 2 years. He's a spirited boy, but not a bad kid, just takes a lot of time, money, and mental energy. The child's case plan has now moved to adoption, and we were identified as an adoptive resource. We were taking the first steps towards adoption when we found out that I was pregnant. It was mind-blowing as this is my first pregnancy, and I am now over 40. I had thought I had finally hit menopause, but was in fact 12 weeks pregnant. Unfortunately, after thinking we could do both, we did the hard math, and with our work and our finances, the only way we could raise our foster son is if we terminate this pregnancy. We can't financially have both children. I can't emotionally bring myself to terminate what is realistically our only chance at a biological child, who I am already bonding with. My husband wouldn't think of it either. We have to refuse the adoption. Unfortunately still, our foster son knows of preparations for an adoption through his therapist and social worker. So now we're taking him away from a stable home and what may be his only chance of adoption as he is older. All for reasons that aren't his fault. Am I the asshole for putting a still unborn child above him? Edit. Baby has passed prenatal testing with flying colors. Finances. We currently live in a 2-bedroom condo. We are required to give foster son his own room, which is not possible with a baby by social services standards. Us moving into the living room doesn't pass either. Social services is giving us until January to find a larger place, but we would have to stay in the county. We can't afford 3-bedroom places in the county, as it's a costly area. We don't qualify for assistance with both of us working, and if one of us quits, we wouldn't be able to afford our current place even with the assistance we could get. Both of us working would make it difficult to swing appointments for 2 children as well. It's a catch-22 basically. Your bond with your current sentient child isn't as strong as your bond with an embryo. I wanna vote you are the asshole, but the kid would be better off in the long run if he isn't raised with a family that's willing to discard him for the better child. The child deserves a better family than these people. I want to tell the kid to just get the duck out because these people aren't your family, and also, kid, I'm so sorry for the mental trauma you will deal with as an adult in that couple that kicked you out of their hearts to welcome a potential child that may or may not kind of look both of them. No, they're not required to abort their baby, but they should have figured out a way to make it work. People do all the time. They are getting rid of a child that they plan to adopt. This child must love and trust them as parents, and now he's being taught that he doesn't matter. He isn't as important as a sack of cells that aren't sentient. It is beyond awful to have a child know that he was given up because his parents loved their future unborn blood child and not him. Think about that for a second. So disgusting. Here is no way to work it out. Perhaps comments. Social services requires that they move into a 3-bedroom house in their current county. The baby cannot share a room with OP. OP cannot move into the living room. The foster child cannot share a room with anybody. These are the rules that OP is constrained by. People who work it out don't have these rules. My parents lived in a 2-bedroom house when my sister was born. I shared a room with her for the next 10 years. That was their way of working it out. It's not an option for OP. OP clearly wants to keep both her unborn child and her foster child. She's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And while you may consider her unborn child to be a sack of cells, OP and many other people do not. Edit. To all the people saying that OP is wrong about the bedroom rule, under California state law, what she's saying is true. There are no restrictions for adopted children, but there are many restrictions for foster children. Here is the proof linked in the comment. Sack of cells. The insensitivity here is really disturbing to me. Having an abortion can be physically and emotionally traumatic even when the woman is certain she doesn't want to or can't have the baby. Imagine having an abortion when you're married, in your 40s and have been trying to get pregnant for years, even undergoing fertility therapy. I would not be able to have an abortion in her circumstances. Not to mention having an abortion under these circumstances could take such a toll that could wind up being a death sentence for their marriage. They'll struggle emotionally with that decision. If they aborted, and it's possible they'll take it out on each other over time. Child Protection Services is to blame. Maybe there's some legal resources that could protect the foster child by loosening up restrictions. It's ridiculous that the baby can't stay in their bedroom for a year or so until they find a way to afford to move to a larger home. I honestly don't know many kids with siblings who have their own rooms. This really needs gold I don't have. Abortions should always be an option, but under no circumstance should someone be shamed for not having one. These are fucking crazy circumstances. Child Protective Services needs to get their shit together because all my friends are having kids, and even if they do have their own room they still sleep in the same room as their parents because it's way easier. These are fucking crazy circumstances. CPS needs to get their shit together because all my friends are having kids. Okay, but OP has to take some responsibility and fight this shit. These are crazy circumstances because OP is making them so. Do you really think her only two options are not to adopt the 9-year-old or have an abortion because of SS? She's framing it that way to let herself off the hook for abandoning this child who's not biologically hers. Numerous commenters with experience in CPS or family law have offered her advice if she would say where's she located or provide more details, but has she? She could have posted this on our legal advice to ask how to fight this 3-bedroom rule, but has she? Also, for what it's worth, she's 16 weeks along. So according to her timeline the adoption of her other son would be finalized before giving birth. And if that's the case then fuck CPS. No, she asked if she's an asshole for planning on abandoning a child she's mothered for 2 years because he is not biologically related to her. In which case yes, she absolutely is. Yeah, there are crazy redditors, but the vast majority of people aren't demanding she get an abortion. IDK man, I would be feeling pretty scared to reply if this many people were being so thoughtless and harsh. She's obviously been working with CPS a while. Don't you think she would know about a loophole or a way to fight it? Don't you think that would have been the first option? She's making a lot of life decisions based on legal restrictions and income, which suuuks don't tell me that it's so easy to make the decision to fight it. If she doesn't respond, she doesn't respond. She doesn't owe anyone anything. She gave the details she wanted. She hasn't offered anything in terms of what she's tried. She's just given a lot of excuses and then complained about how it would be difficult to handle appointments for 2 kids while both she and her husband are working. I'm also not seeing any semblance of pain from her about how hard it might be to give up her foster son. No, I love this child and the idea of hurting him is ripping me apart inside. Or he's a valuable family member and I can't imagine not having him with us. Zip. Zero. Zilch. It's all about how excited she is to be pregnant and how she's bonded with her fetus. The most she can muster is a tepid, "He's not a bad kid but a lot of work and money." It's appalling. She's got a lot of things to consider and I'm sure she's legitimately overwhelmed. Empathize. Why? She's clearly incapable of empathy. While I agree that she doesn't owe us anything, she's gone into very specific details about her infertility treatments to illustrate just how much of a miracle baby hers is. IDK man, I would be feeling pretty scared to reply if this many people were being so thoughtless and harsh. And come on, really? Not everyone on here is a troll. Scroll down past the controversial comments. Plenty of people are correctly pointing out that in a lot of this country her arguments don't make any sense and are offering her help. She's not looking for solutions. She's made up her mind on what she's doing. And I absolutely stand by. It's a huge move to abandon a child who thinks his adoption is currently in place. I'm not offering her a pass just because some people on the internet are rude to her. Because they are a monster who's only concerned with mudgenes and bloodlines, which is frankly a terrible way of thinking, especially in a world where we may not even have a future for any children pretty soon. I honestly am never so disgusted as when I read the kind of gross self-centered mental gymnastics that OP is trying to perform so she can just dispose of this little boy. I hate to be the one to say it, but my biggest question is if she gives this little boy up, and then through horrible circumstances loses the baby, how is that going to feel? I can't imagine the kind of moral strife that would put one in, and I don't know why she would even want to risk that kind of guilt, let alone fuck this child's life and security. So many foster kids get put in horrible homes and subjected to unspeakable abuse. She's potentially consigning him to that future. I'm not sure you know what it means to be attached to life inside you. You can't force someone to kill their unborn baby for the benefit of another. It's just a shitty situation all around. You misunderstand me. I don't want her to give up her biological one. An abortion is something I believe everyone should come to on their own if they choose that path. I just think she should do what it takes to do right by this little boy who has the idea in his head that he has a family. It is going to affect him for the rest of his life. If there were any other reason like he has behavioral health issues we can't manage, we feel he isn't thriving with us, then my opinion would change. But as it stands her reasons are just so shallow and kind of weird. Because they are a monster who's only concerned with genes and bloodlines, which is frankly a terrible way of thinking, especially in a world where we may not even have a future for any children pretty soon. No one fucking misunderstood you. That's a pretty clear indication that you think she should abort. Some women who wanted abortions speak about having emotional trauma after the fact. Can you even imagine being told for years that it was practically impossible for you to get pregnant? Have it actually happen, then have someone online tell you should abort? What kind of emotional trauma would that cause if she went through with it? This is a shitty situation. Plain and simple. Someone is going to come away from this hurting. Some people are saying they think this is a shit post, and I genuinely hope so. So some woman isn't being forced to choose between a biological child and a foster son. Sack of cells. The insensitivity here is really disturbing to me. Couldn't agree more. I'm 100% pro-choice, but holy shit, Reddit's massive hard-on for abortion is making the nutters that cry pro-death almost look like they have a point. The amount of "you're the arsehole" responses in here is absolutely wild. I really feel for OP, even though it's a position I couldn't imagine being in with my state and life right now. I can't blame her in the slightest for not just wanting to pull the plug and be done with it. I couldn't believe the top comments and their replies have been upvoted so much. If this is true, saying that the foster kid is better off without them because of this agonizing decision is beyond my comprehension. Reddit is fucking bonkers. Once the child is adopted, the state can't still say the child needs their own room. OP has also addressed this in the comments. The deadline for her to rectify the situation is January. The adoption will not be finalized by January. She has stated multiple times that if the adoption were finalized, she would not have any need for this subreddit. Why can't the baby stay in her room? It happens usually with parents anyway. I would sleep with a baby in my room to keep my other child. Not that hard. CPS will not allow IT. CPS won't allow they to keep a newborn at bedside. What? Isn't it common practice to do this? We kept our in a pack and play until 6 months. Literally right next to the bed. Of course it's common practice. I kept my kid in my room until she was almost a year, and somehow she's managed to grow into a 19-year-old with no problems. That's why it's a double standard. CPS will not allow them to adopt 9U unless all children in the house, regardless of age, have their own room at the time of adoption. I have dealt with CPS, actually, usually called DCFS, in a ton of cities, states, counties. In no case have I ever heard this to be true, or enforced in the rare cases in which it is true. I've dealt with them, and that rule, personally, I tried to take in my little sister a few years ago when my dad was sentenced to life in prison. She's less than a year older than my son, and I'd planned on having her share a room with my daughter. CPS, and the state in general, wouldn't allow it if all 3 kids wouldn't have their own rooms. We weren't in a place to be able to upgrade to a 4th bedroom, and by the time we were, her biological grandmother moved to her, my sister, area and was able to keep her in the same school and with her friends she grew up with. I fought tooth and nail to try and get her here. I spoke with every relevant gov agency I could, and I hit red tape everywhere. If they can't afford a bigger house, how are they supposed to afford a new baby? Pregnancy isn't cheap, let alone the hospital bill. Bro, do you know how much a fucking house cost? And then the increase of rent they would have to pay for each month. Shit, them not needing to buy a larger house allows them with a lot of extra money to raise a baby. Plus, we don't know their medical insurance or anything. Yet, nothing like CPS cases to show the average age level of this sub. People have no idea how emotionally draining it can be to 1. Try to get pregnant and fail. 2. Have a surprise pregnancy. 3. Be a foster parent. Or 4. Be an adoptive parent. And OP is doing all 4 of those things at once. And then being told that they can't do numbers 3 and 4 because, essentially, They aren't rich enough, not because they don't want to do those things. They are being told they can't. Like, WTF people. This is not a simple, black and white situation. And likely the only true assholes are the legislators writing the bills that force these requirements on CPS and foster adoptive families. And even that's likely a bit of a stretch, because the law can't always account for every corner case. So they have to abort their child because they already have one. What is this, China? If this kid is costing them more than what the state is giving them, then the state should be giving them more. If the state requires them to get a 3-bedroom apartment, they should damn well be doing something to accommodate, not just expect them to eat the cost. The state will not give money to them anymore if they adopt a foster child, is my understanding. After that, it's their child and not the state's responsibility. The kid having his own bedroom is a requisite for the adoption to happen. The current apartment is fine by the state. It's only a problem if they add another kid. Essentially, they don't see it as their problem that a family has another kid and a previously okay apartment no longer works for them. Edit. Since multiple people said this, depends on the state whether they get money or not. So the kid has to have his own room to be adopted, and the baby will be staying with the parents anyway until he can sleep through the night, which may be a year or more. So then he could move in with the kid. That sounds doable. Yup. Baby can stay in the parents' room until the adoption is final, and then the kids can share. There's no option where OP gets to keep her room baby free, or where the new baby gets its own room and they get to make their dream nursery. There are ways to make the situation work. TBH. Personally, given this scenario with the ages involved, even without CPS rules, that's probably still what I would do. Baby in my room for a year until they're sleeping through the night, and then kids together. They could also put the baby in a living room nook, but for me that would probably be more disruptive than my room. I agree. I don't see why they won't just keep the baby in their room. Why would you have a newborn share a room with another child anyway? Because the OP has said they cannot afford both a baby and a foster child, as it would require a 3-bedroom place. They are both working already. No, I know. What I'm saying is, do they count the baby sharing a room with the parents as the foster adopted kid sharing a room, even though he isn't? I mean, if they do, then that sucks. They just didn't mention that option in the OP as having been suggested or explored. That's why I'm going with shitpost. Just doesn't make sense. Once he's adopted, he's their kid. Why would their regulations, but not their financial support, follow them after the adoption? Why couldn't they keep the baby in their room? Too many holes. The more I look at this, the more I think this is a troll. The username and the constant blame on social services would jump through hoops to help a child get adopted by a family that wants him. Those poor workers deal with some harsh subject matter, and when they can get a good ending for one of their children, they really fight for it. This makes sense. Plus, OP already told the 9-year-old about where the adoption process stands. Seems weird to tell the kid that maybe she'll keep him. Plus a repeated refusal to name location, so peeps can look at relevant statutes. AITA. Talk to your caseworker. Cry. Do not immediately surrender this child. GoFundMe. Ask for help. Get your family involved. See if you can slow the adoption process down to allow you to get the baby out of diapers before the foster support is terminated with the adoption. ETA. See if they will speed up the process and edit. You can do both. And if you go into the situation thinking that you can and will, you will make it work. Edit. Also, see what you can do about getting this into the media and see what creative solutions can come about. I feel like OP is catastrophizing here without full info. I can't see any social worker in their right mind telling someone they have to abort a wanted baby or they'll pull a kid from a stable home. I much prefer the tone of your "you are the arsehole" to that of all the others voted above it. I hope OP hasn't been battered into defensive rejection already and reads this one. Agreed. If OP and husband are currently emotional due to "we have to abort kid" help panic mode and would like to keep the foster son, then they need an advice sub and pronto. They need specific advice, guidelines, someone who has been in that situation. Can we maybe forget the rules that this is not an advice sub and see the human behind the keyboard for a sec? This is above Reddit's pay grade. Tentative no assholes here because it's a tough situation all around. But I do think you'd be very, very wrong to cast your foster son aside. He thinks you're going to adopt him, and knowing that you're essentially leaving him behind because you're having a baby will probably emotionally destroy him. Edit. I'm actually going with you're the asshole. It's not fair to your foster son. He's already here and being pushed aside. Seconding that this is above Reddit's pay grade. No one here is qualified to make a fair judgment on OP in this case. It really isn't as clear cut as people are making it out to be. I do think if they really have to choose, they should prioritize the child that they already have for obvious reasons that have been mentioned many times, but I'm not about to judge OP in this situation because it sounds far too overwhelming for them to be in a position to think clearly.
But you know, hey, walk through with her attitude. Gucci on the neck, I can't be mad at you. Yeah, I just do the shit I feel like I had to do. Visa swipe every time she get mad at you. Yeah. Baby got an attitude, okay.